Hi, I'm David Cummins from the 100% Project. In this series of podcasts, we'll be discussing gender diversity within the construction industry and how it has impacted the industry. We will also be investigating the steps necessary for making improvements for gender equality in the future. Althea Papinczak and Erin Oxley met whilst working together at SHAPE a few years ago. Both women started attending several networking events in the Brisbane area and were left a little dissatisfied with the offerings of the day. They were both looking for a networking group that was more welcoming, comfortable, and genuine, where the speakers were open, honest, and relatable, encouraging others to do the same. Then in 2016, with no experience hosting a networking event, they got the ball rolling together with a few of their colleagues and friends and had the first WIDAC networking event with great success. Since then, WIDAC has become a national brand, helping provide a safe, inclusive and respectful area for networking, empowering women to share their experiences from a design and construction industry. WIDAC, Women in Design and Construction, aims to encourage the future generations of this industry to network and collaborate through a relaxed, informal and genuine environment for all. The last few years, WIDAC has gone from strength to strength, even during COVID, where they have been able to hold monthly events, expand their organisation to include blogs, job boards and mentorship programs and educational scholarships. The 100% Project welcome Althea to our first construction series to a look at gender diversity and equality within the industry and the impact it has to both women and men. Welcome Althea, how are you?
Good, how are you, David? Thanks for having me.
That's okay. Thanks for your time. I know you're busy. I know you've got family and your job and your other job and this. I know you're quite busy, so we really do appreciate your time. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the career path to date and how you've ended up being the founder of Australia's largest network for women in design and the construction industry?
Yeah, it was a bit of a funny one, and we do often refer to it as our accidental business. I guess for myself, I've done fit out and construction for around 15 years now. Stumbled upon it a long time ago when I was just looking for a coordination administration type role. Ended up in construction and just absolutely loving it and getting the bug for it and working my way up. And then I'd done retail and hospitality fit out for quite a while before making the change over to the commercial side. And it was about then when I went over to commercial and realized that I needed to go out and meet the different people in the commercial space. So I didn't know who the consultants were that we would be working with, and I needed to go out and meet clients, and I needed to build that network in the commercial space. And when I started going to some different networking events, like you said, it was just very informal or really expensive, or, I wasn't connecting with the right kind of people that I was wanting to meet with. And there wasn't anything in Brisbane at the time that really met my needs. So I decided one day, I went home to my husband and I said, babe, I think I'm going to start a networking group. And he's like, okay, great, go for it. You've got my full support. And our first networking event was 20 women in a pub, and they all loved it. They're like, when's your next one? That was just really, really, inspiring and genuine, because we had some speakers get up who were both very candid in the stories that they shared. And I think that set the tone for it. And when they said, are you going to have another one? Erin and I looked at each other because she'd come along to the first one to help me out. And we were like, I guess we are. And so it really snowballed from there. And Brisbane grew very, very quickly. It was 20, and then it was 50, then it was 70, then it was 100, then it was 150. And then Sydney came on board about a year and a half after that. And then Melbourne came on board maybe another year after that. And since then, we've had all the other states. We've done some roadshow events in each. So it's been a really big roller coaster ride. But I think looking back, Erin and I are really glad that every time the business was asking us to commit to it and help it grow, that we did. Because we do both work. We've always worked still full-time in our construction jobs while trying to manage the business on the side. But we're really passionate about it and we just love it. So whatever we can do to keep it going and, keep seeing it grow and reach more people is what we'd love to do.
It absolutely is amazing. I do remember reading a book, the Julie Gillard Women in Leadership book, and one of her life lessons for younger generations was about networking. And she said she wished she started networking earlier in her career and had more political contacts. Do you feel that it's helped with your career as a whole and that your members have found the benefits as well in their careers?
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, when I decided to start going and doing networking, I wasn't very good at it. I was young and I was shy, and I either take a friend and stand in the corner and talk to my friend and get nothing out of it. But when I decided to go on my own and push myself and go and have those kind of moments where you walk up to a group of strangers and introduce yourself, I think everyone realizes very quickly we're all in the same boat. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, but it's that effort that you put in that's the effort that's going to give you huge returns. Like for me, the number of people that I've met that I've either worked with or then gone on to kind of, be mentored by or helped, find mentors for, or had just really great work relationships, or you can pick up the phone and ask them if you're on a project and you have a really technical question and you're not sure what the answer is. So your network also helps you in really surprising ways. When I finished at my kind of long-term job last year and then decided to make the leap into something new, I reached out and had phone calls with about 10 different people in my network. And it's always just that kind of advice and that support that they're going to give you and those introductions that they might give you. So I think networking is a really valuable thing. And I honestly couldn't say that I would be where I am today if I hadn't had this amazing network that I've probably spent a good part of 5 years building. So yeah, definitely. The younger you can start doing it, the more confidence it's going to give you as well as you progress in your career.
There's another really good book called The Luck Factor, and there's a lot of research to show the benefits of luck, where people actually do go out on their own and be more independent and actually speak to strangers versus the same people all the time. So I think you're living proof of that. So well done. I've been to a few of your events and they are amazing. I've also been to a few that were not as amazing. You guys have survived at least, 5, 6, 7 years now?
5 years in December. Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think's been the secret to your success, knowing that so many have tried and failed in that space before, especially in the construction industry, and even more importantly in a event dedicated to women? A lot of them that were around 5, 7 years ago are not around now. So what do you think is the secret to your success?
I think a lot of it, and it sounds really cliche, but it's so driven by what members want to come and see at our events. When I stood up there on the first day at our first networking event and said, right, this is a networking group and I want to know from all of you, if you come back, what you'd like to hear about, what you'd like to learn about, what you'd like to see. And so every topic that we've ever covered has come from someone in our community, in our network. One of our members saying, I'd love if you could do a workshop on acoustic. I'd love you to cover the road to leadership and how I can eventually move into a executive type leadership role. And I'd love to, come to an event on building code basics or a mechanical masterclass. So everything that we've done in terms of topics and content and the workshop series that we started and then the mentoring program has been suggestions from the people who come to our events. And so that's, I guess, why the content's always remained really relevant, because it's what's needed in the industry. It's what people want to go and learn about and want to see. And I think we've been very careful to make sure that our speakers that we select for our events are literally just people like you and me in their careers. We don't have a lot of professional speakers and we don't have a lot of really senior speakers. I'd say that we try and get a really good mix of juniors all the way through to those kind of senior level roles. But it just means that there's the ability for anyone in the audience to connect and hear from people in the same circumstance as them as to the challenges and the different things and the different things that they've seen work, for them at different stages of their career. So I think that's why it's always been quite successful, in that it feels very approachable, feels very real and authentic, because it is. It's not professional speakers. It's people like you and I working in the design, construction related industry, sharing their stories and experiences in a really candid way.
Yeah, I agree. I also found I went to one that was about domestic violence and also about how to speak to your boss about having children as well. So I do find there's a lot of topics that would traditionally have been taboo, where you wouldn't actually talk to on an open forum. But there was this huge thirst from the audience to hear about these stories that no one had talked about before. And I remember in one of them, you were talking about approaching your manager about the fact that you were about to have children, and there was a huge gasp in the audience where a lot of them were saying, I would never do that. So I do think you also break down a lot of barriers, and it gives a lot of women empowerment to know that there are things that they've thought about but no one's actually talked about in public, really.
Yeah, it is. It's a really tough one, and we try and never shy away from those sorts of topics, but we do make sure that we do them in a really practical and positive way. We've never been a networking group where we're there to whinge and complain about the things that we're struggling with. It's more of a conversation where it's a really open and candid conversation, and you can share the struggles and you can share the challenges, but we always want to know what we can do together or what we can do as individuals to kind of overcome those sorts of things. And the one that you're talking about, I think, was baby proofing your career. And that all came from a personal struggle of mine. I had a really great relationship with my general manager at the time. And I said to him, look, I'm going to start a family and I expect that I'm going to be pregnant really quickly. So FYI, should probably start putting that on your radar for next year when I'm knocked up and I'm out of here. But then for me, I had a really, really tough battle with IVF for 2 years, 2 really hard fought years of IVF to actually get pregnant. And I'd shared that really candidly and really openly with everyone in my workplace. And he supported me the whole way and they supported me the whole way. And I've even shared that with probably thousands of people in the WIDAC community. Like there would be events where I'd be standing up there just so broken, crying to the audience going, yesterday was another failed IVF round for me, but being able to kind of share for me has always been very cathartic. And I understand that it's not for everyone, but we try and really build that into our events where if you are brave enough and you do want to share, this is the place to do it. This is the safe space to do it. Because there's topics that we've covered before, like it's not only around having children, but, you know, going in for a promotion or a pay rise, like that's such a daunting conversation for a lot of people and they really struggle with it. And so we've done quite a few events on it, you know, how to ask for what you're worth. And it's getting them prepped on the practical tips, being like, well, if you know that you're going to get really nervous in there and you're going to shy away from that money conversation, write it down on paper, have it ready to go in there with you, have your bullet points, have the reasons why you're deserving so that you're not going to get flustered, you're not going to choke up, you're going to be able to kind of talk about what you want and what you need and advocate for yourself and know that you're prepared for that conversation. And I think people really appreciate the genuine nature of the conversations that we have because, like you said, they're sometimes not workplace appropriate for some people. They don't like to talk about that sort of stuff at work. So this is hopefully a space where we can do that outside of work, but in the right forum with the right people.
I think to actually hear someone talk about in public where you can actually relate to someone as opposed to behind closed corridors, I think the more you normalize it, because it is a difficult journey for a lot of people. So why not do it? And even to speak to your manager saying, this is what I'm going to do, I think a manager should respect that because he is future-proofing your career and your position and he's de-risking his work. So there's a lot of benefits to it, just not the norm. And I do think you guys are doing that. You are creating these norms, which is fantastic as well for your community.
Yeah, thanks. And that was my thought process. I thought if I told him and I didn't like the way that conversation went, I wouldn't want to get pregnant in a workplace where I knew that it was going to be a rough ride or it wasn't going to be supported. And I've always been probably a little bit too hard on sleeve and a bit too open and honest. That's just who I am. I'm a very open book. But I think for me, honesty has always been the best policy and has always worked for me. So we try and really make sure that that's the same sort of messaging in our events.
Yeah.
To share your struggles and to open up, because vulnerability, I think, is a really underestimated strength. To be able to be vulnerable and connect with people in that way, you'll find that people will just rush to you and offer their help and their support. And it's actually a lot easier when, you know, you feel like you have that support network and that team around you, no matter if it's IVF or if it's talking about the promotion that you're going for or bouncing it off some different people in the industry. Whatever it is, it's always better if you've got that kind of input from others, I think.
Yeah. Speaking about the construction industry, I know you have reported many times to a lot of people that you haven't had too many troubles in the construction industry based on your gender. I've been in the construction industry for 14 years and personally, I have as well, but also I have seen it as well with women in the construction industry. Do you think maybe that vulnerability that you bring and that honesty that you bring is one of the reasons why you probably haven't had as much challenges? Or do you think there's other reasons why I would say you're in the minority? Why would you say you're in the minority then?
I think, yeah, and I was having a really interesting conversation about this with someone the other day. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a project manager, and she was sexually assaulted by someone that she was working with. And, you know, she started that whole kind of blame game, against herself going, I thought that I'd stand up for myself. I thought that I'd be different. I thought that I would be able to go to the police and tell them. And I said to her, I'm like, you never know what's going to happen to you in those moments where someone is, I guess, making you feel really vulnerable and attacking you, whether it's emotional abuse or whether in her instance, it was a physical attack that she went through. I think for me, the reason that I'm maybe in the minority of women who have struggled in some way in the construction industry with either bias or maybe being held back or not getting the opportunities or maybe being spoken to inappropriately is that I've maybe got a very strong persona that people read and go, she wouldn't tolerate it. And I haven't. I had a boss in a previous job say to me, Althea, that top's really distracting. I can't have a conversation with you. You need to go away and put a jacket on. And I said, don't you dare speak to me like that. I have no problem dragging you to HR right now and see if they think my top's inappropriate. And so that kind of stopped that conversation there. And then I never had that kind of inference from him again that he would be inappropriate and speak to me in that way. But I think a lot of people in that same position, if they had someone speak to them like that who didn't have the confidence, maybe would react very differently and probably, in some ways feel embarrassed and ashamed and responsible for what had gone on. And so that's how it happens. And that's, it's really hard. I don't think there are a lot of people with that same kind of attitude and outward confidence that I have to call out things like that. And, maybe a lot more junior staff would think that that would put them in a worse position calling out something like that. And so I do understand it's a really tricky one. But I think maybe, the only way to tackle those sorts of things is really reaching out to the people around you and having a conversation about it. If something's happened to you and you don't feel like you have the voice, at least share it with a few people so that they can give you the support that you need and they can have the conversation with you. And maybe they can give you some ideas on how to deal with it if, you're not able to. I hope that kind of answers the question. It's a really tricky one.
I would say even in my experience personally, you do find these generally older managers who do feel that they do have this power over you because they've been there forever and they do say inappropriate things. I've experienced that myself and I've witnessed that myself. And ultimately what happens is the person who's receiving those comments either feels bad about themselves, gets depressed, gets sad, and ultimately they leave, and they have to leave not only their job, but some people leave their career because some old manager feels they have this power to belittle someone because that's the way they did it 1,000 years ago. And so I do find it interesting that especially women in the industry, I would say that's a big factor of why there's so few women in the industry, purely because it's not a matter of not being able to handle it, but maybe they're smart enough to say, I won't accept that, because it is very hard to take someone to HR. And I've done it myself where I've spoken to HR and they said, oh, that's just so-and-so. Well, he shouldn't really be doing that,
Or they say, we'll have to launch an investigation. We'll need to get witnesses. And that feels very overpowering as well. I've had that happen before about a comment that you wanted to report so that that person is spoken to. But when they start using the words like investigation and witnesses, you go, oh, that's too much. And I don't want to go through that process.
I've had it where, he's the biggest income earner, so we can't do anything. I'm like, oh, okay.
I think the construction industry is getting a lot better. Like for someone like myself to have been able to say that, there's probably been one or two instances in my 15 years in construction where I've had someone say something inappropriately or talk to me, in a way that I found degrading. I would say that every industry is going to have some people who will go through the same kind of experience, whether it's construction or whether it's not. And I know Erin speaks quite openly about the fact that her biggest issue as a female project manager working in construction is often sometimes the unconscious bias that's put on her. So she'll walk into a room and they'll immediately assume that the contract administrator standing next to her, who's a male, is the one leading the job, and they'll direct all the questions to him. I think her way of looking at it is, she could call him out and she could say, excuse me, and make a big deal out of it. But a lot of the time it is unconscious bias, and it's just that's the mistake that they've made. And as soon as she's said to them, I'm the project manager leading this job, I'm happy to answer all of your questions, they go, oh, I'm so sorry. And then there's no issue from there. So I think a lot of it is if you are able to talk very one-on-one to the person that maybe has made the wrong assumption about you, and you're able to give them the opportunity to prove to you and say sorry to you, and, you know, for them to, I guess, make amends because maybe it was a mistake. That's step one. But if it's someone who, like you said, is just out there belittling people regardless of, you know, age and position and everything like that, there's a lot of people probably still in the industry in those very senior roles who've been there a very long time where that behavior was probably tolerated for a big part of their career back in the day. And it's not now, and it shouldn't be now, and it shouldn't be tolerated by companies, and it shouldn't be tolerated by colleagues either. Colleagues need to be, you know, okay with calling it out and stepping up and supporting those around them as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well said. So the 100% Project do a lot of research. That's one of our biggest selling points and our unique selling point. So at the moment, one of our latest research is about Breaking Dad. So the Breaking Dad research focused on psychological safety for men, particularly relating to their participation in flexible working conditions for families and their friends. The research found that men are likely to be stigmatized and being labeled as not being serious about their career if they request conditions such as long-term paternity leave, part-time working, or remote working. Ironically now, thanks to COVID, many workplaces have proven that you can actually work from home and be quite productive. As one of my friends said, overheads are down, profits are up, staff retention is high, and client satisfaction is up. However, there does seem to be this resistance for employers to actually benefit males working from home versus females working from home. Is that, in your experience, especially in, I suppose, more the design industry, have you found there's a bit of difference between males wanting to be the primary carer at home versus females? Is it just always a female job, or is it just always a male job? There seems to be an employer disconnect between the employees as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I was talking to a certifier the other day. So his wife had a baby about a year ago, and back when she was pregnant, they had a discussion and they made the decision that he wanted to go down to part-time, so that after his 2 weeks of paternity leave had finished up, that he would be able to spend the time going forward having an extra day at home a week, because he's like, I need to make sure that she's supported, and B, I want to be there. Those are really important, critical years, and I don't want to miss out on the memories. He had a conversation with his workplace and said, I want to go down from 5 days to 4, and they said, no, like, exactly that. You're in a senior role. It's a 5-day-a-week role. So he went and spent a year interviewing with other firms trying to find a 4-day-a-week role as a senior certifier and couldn't. He ended up renegotiating with his current employer, and they came to the party and said, okay, you can do 4, that's fine. But he said that he's pretty much worked 5 anyway since going to 4 days a week. So he said the whole process has really opened his eyes up, because for his partner, she asked to go to 3 days a week when she was coming back from maternity leave, and it just was not even a question. That was just something that was ticked off immediately for her, and they're very flexible with her hours. You know, for me personally, when I had my maternity leave, I did 10 months and I came back and I wanted to do 3 days a week and I wanted to do certain hours, and they said, yep, that's fine, not a problem. My husband would absolutely have adored to be able to be a stay-at-home dad for that part of my maternity leave contract. But his workplace, and he's in finance, which is different, but they're like, no, it's a 5-day-a-week role. We don't offer part-time. And I think there aren't many industries out there who seem to be willing to offer guys a part-time position, whether it's 4 days or whether it's 3 days. And he said it's the same thing. It's that stigma where people are like, oh, you're leaving at 4 o'clock to go pick up the kids, and how nice for some. And he's like, well, we share pick up and drop off. Is it that your wife does all the pick up and drop offs? So I think there's a lot of stigma put on dads. And then I know other dads who were full-time stay-at-home dads in the design world, architects, and took time off to be stay-at-home dads. And then when they were coming back to work, felt in a way that they were just put on a pedestal. People and other mothers and other women would just marvel at them going, that's so selfless of you. And this parent was like, well, no, like, that was my choice and that's what I wanted to do. She took the first 6 months off. I took the next 6 months off. That's what we wanted to do. But I think the more that families make a way to make it work for them, and there's more males taking time off or doing part-time hours or doing flexible working, the more it's going to become normalized. And they have to ask for it. I think more men have to ask for it, because companies are going to catch up. Companies always will eventually catch up to the requests. And, you know, if you're losing good staff and they're leaving your company to go and work for another company that does offer that kind of flexibility for dads, very quickly it becomes a much more competitive industry as a whole, I think. So hopefully we see a bigger shift towards it being a bit more even in future.
I think you're 100% right. Even the whole females who were traditionally doing 5 days going to 4 days. All the research shows they were still doing 5 days worth of work at less cost and actually being more productive. And employers were still struggling with that process and to understand that. And I do think one of the benefits of COVID is that people actually can work from home. You can be productive. And this whole idea of actually being the first one to work, the last one to leave, when majority of the time people are on Facebook and not being productive, it just doesn't make sense. So I do think that's one of the benefits of COVID. So I do hope that that does continue.
Yeah, and I think just quickly as well, like there's a lot of senior females I know in construction who might be a senior project manager or a project director, and they've said it's really hard if they want to go and have babies at later stages in their careers to come back into a senior role. Is a project director able to work 3 days a week? If they've been told no, then I have heard about recently a few different employers who are now looking at, for those senior roles, getting 2 people to job share. So one will do 3 days and the other one will do 3 days. So they both do the 3 days and there's a day crossover where they're both in the office. So they have to be highly organized. They have to be able to do really thorough, good handovers. And the employer is paying for that extra day of resourcing per week, but it means that he hasn't lost 2 senior females out of the business who couldn't come back and work the hours that they wanted to work after having a baby. So I think employers have to become more flexible and they have to become more innovative in the way that they're looking at resourcing. And it's even for the guys too, like site managers who want to do 3 days or 4 days a week typically have never been able to do that before. But we had a site manager in our company who wanted to do 3 days a week because he's on track to retirement and he's getting older and he wants to not do the 5 day a week and the big hours anymore. And so they paid him as a site manager as a floating resource to cover the days where one of the other site managers had an appointment or some of the sites were extraordinarily busy and they needed extra resourcing. So they were able to take him in a part-time basis and offer that as something that I don't think you see a lot of. I don't know a lot of other part-time site managers. So I think it's just employers being a bit more agile in the way that they look at resourcing in the future.
Totally. And there's so many benefits to that, understandably. So what changes would you like to see in the construction industry for a more diverse and gender equality workplace for the future? Because I just don't think we're there yet, but I definitely do see the changes in my career in the last 12 plus years. I have seen changes, but I do think we've got a long way to go.
I think it was good that I went and had my baby and maternity leave and came back from maternity leave to be able to kind of look at it full circle and see what all of the different kind of challenges and constraints are at different stages. In my early years, it was probably getting enough exposure and getting enough one-on-one training and mentoring and being given the opportunity to step up and being given tasks to be more autonomous as I was young and really energetic and wanting to just absorb all the learning that I could. And then as you get more senior in an organization, I think it's really important that you have male bosses around you advocating for you and putting you forward for the big jobs or the big projects, putting you forward for promotion, being able to make sure that when you're going into those discussions around pay reviews or performance reviews, that they're looking at it and making sure that you're not just walking away from that conversation too nervous to have it. I think if more male and female bosses were more encouraging and even mentoring employees through that conversation, like it's a hard one because you think about it, businesses are there to make money. So it's a really difficult one. But I think if more bosses are there spending the time with employees to help nurture those negotiation skills, that's going to really help females feel empowered and like they're being supported in the workplace. And then as men and women want to go and start families, if that's what they choose to do, the conversation should be more normal. It should be more accepted that if I came to you and said, hey, I'm looking at starting a family, that would always be supported, that wouldn't mean that all of a sudden you're dropping me down to the smaller projects because you're nervous that I'm going to get pregnant and finish up 9 months later. So I think generally it's a lot on the employers to really make sure that they're there for the open, candid conversations and they're willing to have them, and that those open and candid conversations are met with the support that employees are looking for. Through the maternity leave phase, I got paid maternity leave and that was amazing. I got 12 weeks paid maternity leave and that was a game changer for me. And then when I came back, I got daycare assistants for the first 2 years. So that, again, I think is probably one of the most non-talked about barriers for women and parents in, returning from having a baby. Because if you're coming back 3 days a week and you're paying through the nose for daycare, that's a big barrier. So for me, having daycare assistants and meaning that I was essentially around $20 a day out of pocket, I was happy to come back 3 days a week. I was happy to come back 5 days a week. It wasn't a barrier anymore. I think that's a big one that could be really looked at in terms of those paternity policies is daycare. And for me, that just took a lot of the stress away from figuring out financially how I was going to make it work coming back to work if I did want to come back less days a week, and how that would work with mortgage repayments and the rest. Generally, COVID has been a really good one in changing employers being open to flexible work and understanding that we can all work from home. We'll have laptops, we all have phones, so you're available whenever. But I think it's gone back the other way where you just never switch off now. So I have to make a really concerted effort that when I finish work, I don't take my laptop home and I'm not on my phone looking at emails, because it's with you 24/7 now, especially through lockdowns. If you're locked down and you're working full time, it's just you're on screens constantly. And I think it's really hard to switch off and make sure you have that mental time to yourself to unwind and everything like that. I have seen that it's a very competitive market at the moment in construction and design and project management and all our related industries. It's a very competitive market. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of people moving around at the moment. And so I think the employers who are going to best support employees are going to be the ones that do the best. I think employees know what they want now, and they're going to get it. And if they don't get it with you, they're going to move and they're going to get it from someone else.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well done. And so what does the future of WIDAC look like for you, or what's the future hold? I mean, you've done so much and you've achieved so much. I do think it is the biggest in Australia. And I was looking around the world. I haven't seen any as big as you. So I'm willing to say you've got the biggest network in the world. So I'm going to give you that title today, unless anyone wants to challenge me. So what's the future look like for both of you?
To be really honest, really, really candidly honest, WIDAC was an absolute whirlwind that grew overnight and got really big. And then we had a couple of years where we're like, we're well established in 3 states. We're going to just keep doing what we know we're really good at and get the business in the best position as we possibly can to get ready to grow into these other states. And so we'd done some roadshow events in Adelaide and South Australia and Canberra, and we were ready to head over to Perth and Tasmania and Northern Territory, and then COVID happened, and the last 2 years have been very tough for us. Like everyone else, I know it was the most overused word of 2020, but we pivoted and we went digital and we went online, which for people like Erin and I who are face-to-face people who love that human interaction was really weird, and I still would say that I'm not a big fan of digital events. Like, I'll openly say that I'm not a big fan of digital events. I'd rather be seeing people face-to-face. I'd rather be standing there, having a wine with you and having a conversation in a big room of people. But I think it's meant a lot for our business in terms of being able to reach other people that we might not have been able to reach before. And now with borders opening up, we are ready to go back and continue expanding and meeting new people in those other states that we're not, well established in yet. So we're really looking forward to heading to Adelaide and Canberra and Perth and South Australia again. And for us, I think the sky's the limit with WIDAC. We really have looked at it and said, what is the secret sauce and what's the recipe that's meant that it has been so successful? And I think for us, there's other industries that desperately need something similar as well. That might be industries like IT and finance, where there's not a networking platform as candid and open and honest and agile as we are. So we definitely love the design, construction and related industries. We feel like we've done a lot, in this space, and we want to grow further around Australia to mean that we can reach more people. But I do also think that in the future, there's a lot of opportunity for us to keep growing the business as a whole and helping more women even outside of our group of industries. So it's a really exciting thing. I think for Erin and I, as business partners of 5 years, sometimes it's a really daunting thing to own a company where we're trying to figure out what's next and what's the next big move. And we're both still working and trying to figure out at what point do we step back and do WIDAC full time, or do we keep, running with the amazing team that we have who are running the company and the events for us. So we still don't know. And I think COVID threw a big spanner in the works and made us stop and realize, but luckily we're a very agile business, and coming back, people are desperate to get out and network is what we've seen. So next year's already looking huge for us. So it's exciting, I think. Whatever the future holds, it'll be exciting.
I have no doubt it'll be positive. Thank you so much for your time. All the best to you and WIDAC and the team. Hopefully I get to catch up with you soon for a beer and wine.
Yeah, definitely.
We do thank you for your time and really appreciate everything you've put into WIDAC and everyone else as well.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It's been awesome.
If you would like to find out more about the 100% Project, our research, and listen to other podcasts, please visit our website, the100percentproject.com.au. Thank you for listening.